here. I'm going to recognize myself for 5 minutes. And as I start out here, maybe there's some agreement or some good debate between you two. What is the budget that we're looking at, on average, year over year? What are some of the budgets we're looking at for DRL from what you all have seen in terms of grants going out the door?
Well,
not everything coming in for salaries, but when we're talking about grants going out the door, what are you guys seeing, if we can agree on some kind of roundabout?
yeah, we were looking at at least when I was Assistant Secretary, it was about $1.5 billion. I think it's gone up a bit. The operations budget was about 40 million.
Yeah, that's not right. So the grant budget when I was there was a little over $100 million a year. During the Trump administration, Congress increased it. It went up about 4 times. I don't have the exact figure, obviously, but it went up to, I think, in the $400 to $500 million range.
How many grants do you all think that's getting divided into?
It's about, I think, on an annual basis, roughly about 1,000. DRL is one of the cool things about the Bureau, in my view, is that they're pretty good at doing very small grants. So like USAID can't do anything under like mega millions. One of the best programs that DRL has, that has strong bipartisan support, is the ability to get very tiny grants of like $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 out in even less than 48 hours.
And of the
people, just to be finished,
grants,
to people who needed to like stay alive.
About? How many sub-grants do you all think? The entity that you wrote a grant to is now writing another or several other grants to other entities that you did not actually give $1 to. You did not vet.
That's pretty hard. That's pretty hard to say. That was the basis for my comment about the big organizations like Chemonics and others that understand the federal acquisition regulations. You can't, without doing what Jim said earlier, get down into the field and give some Nigerian human rights defenders, a small grant for peace building. I mean, they just don't know how to account for the money. So it requires a lot more, a lot of that money gets sucked off in overhead, I would suggest to you.
Elaborate on that when you say sucked off in overhead. Right, I brought up the example numerous times. We almost had a whole hearing on the atheism in Nepal. But the numbers are round, and so we'll use it as an example. $500,000, expand atheism in Nepal. It was denied here for several hours until we ultimately held it up. And then afterwards, the people that were here denying it for 2 hours called me afterwards and said, oh, crap, sorry, and we missed half of the slides in the program. By the way, here they are. The lawyer sent it to us. But when you look at that $500,000, Nepal's probably daily wages, probably $2 a day on average, something like that there. So what do you think the $500,000 went to? I know this is a pure speculation question, but was it $50,000 towards producing 100 slides to give a PowerPoint, and then the other $450,000 in paying salaries for people at some NGO sitting in England, or what is it?
Well, it is pure speculation. Jim would probably know better what the overhead rates are.
Yeah, I could talk a little bit about sort of generically rather than the specific, because I don't know the specific project. The challenge that we have, and you're exactly right. So what we end up doing is we'll give a grant to an NGO in London who will then hire some random German to then fly to Uganda and set up a program where there'll be an office space, there'll be this guy's family or this gal's family, and then they'll run a program which will have slides and office and those types of things. Once you start getting to the actual implementation of the program, what we often see is a 50% overhead rate. And there's been efforts afoot to try to limit the overhead rate, and it's different between contractors and grantees, and what that actually does is different based upon the type of program, the sector, the region that you're operating. But there's a lot of countries that do foreign assistance that really try to limit overhead to under 10%, which I think is the right metrics and right approach.
And would you say what you're outlining is par for the course, whether you're talking about DRL or USAID or Commerce or take your pick of where the dollars might be coming from in terms of aid going abroad.
Every agency is different, but I do think that there's general consensus about, yeah, that is the way most of the, at least on the foreign assistance side at state and aid, there is a consistency. As the former congressman said, I mean, you have, DRL does sort of micro grants where aid sort of lives in the $1 to $5 million range. So there's a little bit of different in scale, which allows you to have different expectations. And but there's also different levels of programming. Often you'll see 5-year programs run out of aid, where you may have shorter out of DRL. So it just depends on each one.
Chair now recognizes Mr. Crow for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We heard today that DRL does somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,000 grants, hundreds of millions